Hey everyone, I'm Ian Douglas. I'm one of the instructors at Turing, and I wanted to make a brief little video to kind of share my thoughts and perspectives on using hashes within Ruby. And so I'm going to share my screen. I'm going to show you my terminal window. I'm also going to pull up an editor as well and kind of walk you through some helpful things with regards to using hashes and how to both set and retrieve data from a hash. So to get started, I need to Okay, so I've got my terminal path here. Oh, I need to share my screen. That would be helpful. Let's share my whole desktop over here. All right, so what we can see over here is I've got my terminal window open. And what we're gonna do from here is we're going to open Atom, and we can just say Atom space dot, and that's gonna open an editor within this path. We'll wait for Atom to load. Sorry, I had it open in another screen and it should open back up here. Let's try that again. All right, here's my Atom. All right, this out of the way. Cool, so we can see right now, I don't have any folder or any files in here at all. So a couple of different ways that we can make files. We can come in here and we can touch file 1.rb, for example, and we'll see that it's going to show up over here. I can also control click on my folder and say new file. And I can say file2.rb. I can also use a shortcut within Atom where I can just hit the letter A on my keyboard and it'll prompt me for a file name. I can say file3.rb, but that's not why we're here. We're here to learn about hashes. So I'm gonna go ahead and delete all these and I'm gonna create a new file in here. So control click, oops. I'm just gonna use the hotkey for A and we're just gonna run a file called hashes.rb. All right, so to kind of give you some background on what hashes are a data structure within programming. And if we reverse those words, we basically learn that this is a structure for data. And there are lots of different kinds of data structures in programming. Hashes and arrays are the two most common that you're gonna use both in Mod 0 as well as your whole time at Turing. But over your course of instruction at Turing, you're gonna learn about other data structures as well and how to use those and why we might use one over the other. And there are a lot of data structures out there that we just won't have time to get to even in the 7 months of Turing. And so there will be plenty more for you to explore and kind of weigh pros and cons to kind of find the best tool for the job. But we're here to learn about hashes. So what is a hash? A hash at its heart is really what we call a key value data storage. And so what does that mean? Well, that means that we have something, and I'm just gonna call it hash, and we're gonna start by just building that out with empty curly braces within Ruby. And basically what we can do within that hash is we can access things, we can access data using a named attribute. With arrays, everything was kind of in a positional index, which was numeric. In a hash, we just access everything using a name of some kind. And a name will typically be a string, but there are also ways of using what we call symbols within Ruby. And I'm gonna touch on that really briefly. I'm not gonna go into a lot of depth as to why we would wanna use one over the other. You can talk to your instructors about that if you're curious. So to build out a hash here, I'm gonna start by just setting a key, and I'm gonna say the key is my name. And I do this equal greater than. This equal greater than is sometimes referred to as a hash rocket, which you'll hear. And that's because we're using it in the context of a hash, and it kind of looks like a rocket. That's, I guess, how it got its name. So what I'm gonna do in here is I'm just gonna set this name attribute to be my name, Ian Douglas. Now, if I print out this hash and save this and come over here and I'm gonna run Ruby hashes, then we can see that it actually found my key called name, which contained a value which was actually my name. And so this is how we can set this up. I can add a comma on the end of this line and set a new key in here, and I'm gonna call it address. I'm gonna set another hash rocket, and I'm gonna set this to 123 Main Street, not my real address. And I'm gonna save that, come over here and run that again. And now, because it's printing out my hash, I can see that I have two keys. I have my name and my address, and my name is set to my actual name. My address is set to not my real address. And that's that's one way that we can build a hash. Now, we can continue to add more keys to this hash outside of declaring it with these curly braces. And we would do that just by accessing hash with square brackets. And we can set a new key in here. And I'm going to call it favorite number. And I'm going to set this to a value of 14. And so we're not limited to just strings as our values. We can use number values. We can set other things. For example, I can say favorite hockey teams, for example. So favorite hockey teams. I'm originally from Canada, so I'm big into hockey. And I'm going to set that to be an array of strings like the Ottawa Senators and maybe the Colorado Avalanche. So now when I come over here and I run this, we actually see a lot more stuff getting put in here. I have my name, I have my address, I have my favorite number, which is set to 14. Now we can see that this is an integer value because it doesn't have quotes around it like my address did, or quotes like my name did. There's no quotes around this 14, so that tells us this was an integer value. We also had a key called favorite hockey teams, and this was set to an array of my favorite hockey teams, the Ottawa Senators and the Colorado Avalanche. So that's another way that we can add things to a hash. We can just use our hash variable name, and using the square bracket notation, we can set just a single key at a time. Now we can't set multiple keys in here. Also, we can no longer use curly braces to add things. For example, I can't say go add, you know, my school and setting that to Turing, for example. We can no longer do this. Oops, that has to be a hash rocket. We can no longer do this because this is redeclaring a brand new hash. If I go run this again, I've lost all my other keys. So we no longer have access to using the curly brace to add other keys and values to our hash. The only way that we can do that once we stop using that curly brace is to use the square bracket notation, similar to what we've done here, and we have to do that a single key at a time. Now, we can also embed these hashes within themselves. For example, I could have another hash that I'm just going to call students. And within my students hash, I'm going to set a key called Ian, and I'm going to set that to be my other hash. When I run this now, let's print out my students hash. When I print this out now, we're going to see that I have a key in my hash called Ian, and its value was the whole other hash. I know this is getting a little mind-bendy because we're kind of nesting data within nested data, but this is how we build up very complex data structures using hashes. Inside of here now, if we want to access these different values, for example, I can print out students Ian. I can also print out students Ian. And using another set of square bracket notation, I can pull up my favorite number. And I can also access my name and my favorite number, and I'm going to print out all these values as well. And so we can see here that we printed out the entire hash. That came from line 13 of my code. We can also see that I'm printing out just that subhash of students Ian, which was just my name, my address, my favorite number, my favorite hockey teams. But if I continue to kind of chain on these square brackets, I can access the deeper nature of this hash as well. And I can access Ian's name. I can also access Ian's favorite number, which we see here as just the string of my name and the number 14 that came back as well. So hopefully that was helpful, hopefully not too confusing. Again, we can just access a single key to write those values. Now, to show you how I would print those out, for example, I could print just hash favorite number. And when I run this, we'll see that number 14 pop up here in my output before it prints anything else. And so we can access the key within the hash by accessing our hash variable name, as well as the name of the key, using the square bracket notation. Now, how we build a hash, we can use the curly brace with an open and a close, where we can define our keys with the hash rocket and set it to a value. And we can do that as many times as we need to. We just have to make sure that we put a comma on the end here, for example, and we could move favorite number up into here if we wanted to, except I need to take off that square bracket and turn that into a hash rocket. And now, for example, if I print out my hash and come over here, we see that my favorite number is still in here. All we did was move it up inside of the curly brace notation. And then if we want to add values later, we have to use the square bracket notation. We can't use the curly braces anymore. We have to use square brackets. And then from there, we can access the entire hash, or we can access just a piece of that data by accessing the key. So I can print out just my name. I can print out just my favorite number, or I can print out all of my favorite hockey teams. Oops. And then I can also access my favorite hockey teams as an array. Say, who's my very favorite hockey team? That's the Ottawa Senators. So now when we print all this stuff out, we see the whole hash. And then we see where I printed out the name here on line 10. It gave us just my name. On line 11 was my favorite number, and that gave us the 14. I print out all of my favorite hockey teams, which gives us that whole array. And then I can access that array the same way that I would access any other array. And just say, give me index 0 of that array, and I get just the Ottawa Senators. So again, hopefully that was helpful as kind of a walkthrough on how we can read and write values in a hash within Ruby. And we'll see you in the next video. Cheers.